Well, welcome to Your Schools on Community 7 Television. I'm Veis, and I'm your host. Each month, we look at a different aspect of what's going on with Billings Public Schools. And this month, we're going to start a series of interviews that we're going to do over the course of time, kind of looking at the different grade levels as kids move through school and seeing where they're supposed to be in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, all those different things. And what better place to start than in kindergarten? So we have a kindergarten teacher here to talk with us. Kristen Berge teaches kindergarten at Central Heights Elementary. Yep. Kristen, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Right. So before we get started talking about kindergarten, let's talk a little bit about your background. Okay. Did you grow up here in town? Did you come to town? Give us some history and background.
I am a product of Billings schools myself. I grew up going to Rose Park Elementary in Lewis and Clark. Then senior scared me a little bit size-wise, so I made the decision to go to Billings Central, which was a great decision for me. Yeah. My younger sister continued on at West High, but it was a great decision for me. Stayed here at MSUB for college and got hired in the district right after I student taught.
All right. So, when did you figure out I want to be a teacher?
That's one of my favorite stories ever. When I was in 8th grade, we were offered the opportunity to do a peer tutoring class at Lewis and Clark. So I was, for one period a day, I was able to go into the special needs classroom and help with some pretty severely disabled kiddos.
Sure.
And they were all my age, but just, had a lot of high needs, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it, and I knew from that time on I wanted to be a teacher. And I initially went into special ed. I have both degrees.
Oh, okay.
So I spent some time teaching special ed, but that was when I decided that I wanted to be a teacher.
All right.
Never looked back.
So you graduated from college, got a job teaching. What did you teach kindergarten right out of the chute?
No, I didn't. I was actually hired as a long-term sub first. That was my foot in the door, and I taught first grade for half of a year. And then I was hired as a special ed preschool teacher. So I taught 3 to 6-year-olds, for about 7 years. And I actually piloted a program for the district for 2 to 6-year-olds with autism diagnosis for the last couple of years that I taught special ed preschool. So.
All right. And then when did you start teaching kindergarten?
I started teaching kindergarten in 2008, I believe. It was the second or third year that kindergarten was full day in Billings Public Schools.
Okay.
So.
What do you enjoy most about teaching kindergartners?
Well, it's exhausting, but they're so fun.
Yeah.
Like daily, I should have been writing things down to do a book because just the things that come out of their mouths, they're hilarious. They make me laugh every day. And I also don't think that there's another grade level where you see as much growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and not necessarily just academic growth, but they grow up. Some of them come in August barely 5 years old. Yeah. And by the time that they leave in June, they know how to do school, and they're big kids, and that's pretty cool to watch.
All right. Maybe what's the most frustrating or unrewarding, or maybe what are some of the frustrations that come with being a kindergarten teacher?
I think a lot of public perception of what kindergarten is pretty frustrating. I even have friends in my social circle that aren't necessarily involved in education that go, well, gosh, how hard can it be? You just play with kids all day. And nothing could be further than the truth. It's a lot of work. And I don't think that people realize how much it has changed in the 10 years since I started teaching kindergarten. I went up to first and third grade and then came back to kindergarten last year, and it was mind-blowing how much it has changed in the last 10 years.
So let's, a couple of baselines. You can't go to kindergarten until you've turned 5. Do you know what that date is?
September 10th.
September 10th. So I have to be 5 years old on September 10th, or I can't even go to kindergarten. That's
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And then do you know off the top of your head, you might not, and I put you on the spot, so if you don't know, when did we switch from half-day kindergarten to full-day kindergarten?
I believe it was 2007.
Okay.
Yes.
So it has been a while that we've had all-day kindergarten. Yep. Okay. And so when your school year starts and you got the kiddos coming in, what kind of disparity do you see in that class that's coming into a kindergarten class?
Every year is a little bit different. This year is probably the biggest spread that I've ever seen with kids. You always have a few that come in and don't know letters, don't know their name in print, even recognizing their name. Maybe aren't counting consistently, those kind of things.
Sure.
But on top of that, this year, I also have some kids that came in reading at the 4th grade level.
Wow.
So that's a huge gap to try to bridge as a classroom teacher when there's one of me and 17 of them.
Is there, so if you've got that student that walks in the door and they read at the 4th grade level, is there a lot they can accomplish in kindergarten over the course of the year, or what do you need to get them through over the course of the year?
You know, a lot of kindergarten is learning how to do school. And even if you come in a super high reader and doing awesome things in math already, you still have a lot to learn just about how to work with kids in a classroom and how to do cooperative learning and those kind of things. We are fortunate at my school that we have the ability to be able to extend those kids, because I'm not okay with them coming in high and they're already doing great, we'll just leave them be. They still need to make some growth too. So we are able to do some extensions and have our reading interventionists work with them and do some different things too.
So do they go to other classrooms, I guess, for part of the day?
That's kind of up to each individual school and each individual kid, as far as what they could handle. Some kids would do great, and I've had that in the past where kids have gone maybe up to a grade level or two for a reading group. Some kids socially aren't ready for that, or that might just be too intimidating to go to a different classroom. So it all just depends on the kid.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the things that they are learning in kindergarten. One of the things that we talked about already is they're learning how to do school.
Yes.
How long does it take them to learn how to be at school?
You know, I schedule for a good 6 weeks.
Okay.
4 to 6 minimum. And that's not saying that we're not doing anything academic yet.
Right.
But kindergartners, you can't take for granted that they come in knowing how to do any of those basic school things.
Sure.
They need to be taught, how do you line up? How do you walk down to the bathroom? How do you get your lunch tray? How do you move through the line? You know, every little thing needs to be explicitly taught and practiced.
Sure.
And depending on the group of kids and the size of your class, I went from a class of 23 kindergartners last year to 17 this year. So things went a little quicker and smoother this year, just because of numbers.
Right.
So,
what is the biggest classroom that you're supposed to have with kindergartners?
kindergarten accreditation for the state is 20.
20. Okay. All right. And then as far as learning things, what about socially? How long does it take them to kind of get set in the... This is the social setting of school.
You know, sometimes all year. It truly depends on the kid and the situation. And it really depends on how much prior experience they had in a structured setting before they came to kindergarten. If they have a strong preschool background, some of those kids really do well right off the bat. If they've maybe been at home with mom, which there's nothing wrong with that, but if they're not used to being in a group of kids, sometimes it can take a little bit longer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are there specific skills that you can identify within those kids that you work on over the course of the year?
Oh boy, a lot of turn taking, a lot of, not interrupting. We call them shouter-outers in my classroom. 5-year-olds are by nature impulsive, and they want to tell you everything. I changed my hamster's cage last night, or it pops into their head and it comes out of their mouth. And just teaching those basic skills is a big part of it.
And then let's talk about academic-wise. Give us a baseline. We talked a little bit about that, or for the most part, what do your kindergartners know, and then what are you hoping they know when they leave and head out to first grade?
So when they begin the year, it's great if they already know letters, letter names. If they know some sounds on top of that, it's great. If they know how to write their name is good coming in, colors, shapes, all those things that used to be considered what you taught in kindergarten. They kind of need to have a pretty good basis of those when they come in.
Okay.
Counting to 10 at least, counting with one-to-one correspondence, being able to touch an object and count, not just grabbing a group of them and calling them 12 without counting. So those are the things that we really look for at the beginning of the year. By the end of the year, kindergartners are expected to be reading. They're expected to be able to write a complete sentence. One of the things they're graded on their report card is personal narratives and being able to write an opinion piece, which an opinion piece in kindergarten might look like a sentence or two, but they're still expected to know how to write an opinion. They need to be able to count to at least 100, identify numbers to 100, ideally. They need to be able to add and subtract within 10, write their numbers up to 20. It's a lot. It's a lot. The academic expectations have really changed a lot.
having taught, I think, first and third grade, is that right? Do you see the importance of what you do now in kindergarten, and how does it manifest itself in those first graders and in those third graders, and what did you see when you were teaching those grades?
You know, it's interesting that you ask that question. My teaching partner this year actually is going to retire, and she has never taught anything lower than third grade and actually came to kindergarten from fifth grade this year. So it was a big shock for her. And she is telling people everyone should have to teach kindergarten once because you see everything that has to be laid down, you know, all the brickwork that has to be laid down for these kids to be successful as they go on. You know, learning how to do school, how to be a good friend, how to get along with kids in class, how to communicate your needs appropriately. You know, all of those things. If kids don't have those basic things in place by the time they move on to first grade, it's kind of a snowball effect, and they'll just continue to struggle as they go on.
Right.
So.
And how do you balance over the course of the year? You know, we talked about, okay, I've got this group who's pretty school ready, and I've got this group who's maybe not so school ready. How do you bring them together so they're at that level to first grade? I mean, do you have to work with them individually, or how do you do that to get them ready to move on to first grade?
I do a lot of small group work. We all do a lot of small group work in our classrooms. Reading wise, by this point in the year, I have kids broken into groups based on what their needs are. You know, I've got a group that's obviously reading some pretty high level texts. I've got some groups that are in beginning readers. I've got some work groups that are still working on letters and sounds. Same in math. I'm able to pull them to work on what they need and boost those skills up. And we're also lucky enough to have the reading interventionist that I mentioned earlier, and we have a paraprofessional that can come in and pull kids for some small group work. And some intervention programs if they need a little bit of extra support.
And is that helpful to them to come in and, okay, now I'm a high reader, so obviously I don't need to be in the group to learn letters, but I don't imagine the kids are seeing this on the scale, but I'm assuming all the kids that need to learn their letters are going to feel more comfortable with all the kids that need to learn their letters and all the people that. And do you see that in your classroom as well? You know,
I do, and even the kids that come in as high readers and are already have that stuff, a firm grasp on it, they still love to do the activities. They love to do the little letter crafts, and they love to help brainstorm. You know, okay, our letter this week is L. Give us some L words, and we'll build our chart. And a lot of times, those kids can be leaders in that sense, and they can help you write the words, and that's a real positive thing for them too.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about kindergarten readiness. What are some of the things that, you know, parents are encouraged to do to have their child ready for kindergarten? You
know, one of the things that I've noticed, especially in the past 5 or 6 years, is that we have a generation of kids that have grown up with a tablet or a smartphone in their hands since they can hold one. I really feel like kids need to learn how to be bored. They need to learn how to sit and listen. I'm not nearly as entertaining as YouTube. And it's hard when kids have that constant stream of entertainment, and then we're expecting them to come to school and sit and listen and be able to focus and attend and all of those things. So I think, you know, the tried and true reading books at home, story time at the library, you know, when you're out and about, identify the numbers on the lanes at the grocery store, you know, just talking about environmental print. Oh, what does that big M mean? Yep, that's McDonald's. What's that red? That's a stop sign. You know, just talk to your kids and talk about the world around them, and really, I guess, don't rely on the electronics to get them ready for school. There's some great resources. You know, I always recommend, there's a couple of great apps. ABC Mouse is good for kiddos that are getting ready to come to school, but I just, you know, and we've also seen fine motor really kind of decline. Kids are coming in not having any idea how to hold scissors, not having, you know, their hand strength is really weak, coloring is hard. So some of those fine motor tasks have really been difficult too.
Are there any resources that Billings Public Schools has for getting your kid ready to go to school?
They offer a preschool screening, and I believe that's on the website. You can find the dates for that. I think it's held up at Rimrock Early Learning Center.
Okay.
And those are for kids from 3 to 5 years old. They come in and do a whole battery of assessments. They do developmental, they check vision, they check hearing, they have a speech screening. So anybody can do that, whether you think your kiddo is ready to come to school or not. It's still great information to have. I actually found out that one of my own children had a hearing loss through taking her to the preschool screening.
Sure.
So that's a very valuable resource.
And then does that information follow through to you? Do you those
Yes.
students that are of yours that have been screened, does that information get to you?
Yep, it ends up showing up in their file wherever
Okay.
they've enrolled at kindergarten.
All right.
Yep.
And then having worked with special needs kids too, how do you integrate special needs students into kindergarten, and if so, how do you do that?
You know, I don't at the school that I'm at right now.
Okay.
I would love to. When I taught 3rd grade at Washington Elementary, I had buddies, kind of like my own experience
Sure.
in middle school, and the kids loved it. The special needs kiddos and my kids in my
Sure.
class. It was such a great experience for all of them. So if I ever had the opportunity to be able to do that again, I absolutely would in a heartbeat.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about when is your student ready to be to school? And I know there's a pretty big movement out there for maybe holding your student back, and they're going to come to kindergarten maybe a year later. Talk about maybe the pros of that and the cons of that as well.
You know, I think it all depends on the individual kid. I personally, my son was 5 years old this July 1st.
Yeah.
And I struggled, even as a kindergarten teacher, and knowing he's had 2.5 really good years of preschool. I knew he was ready, and I still had that mom guilt about sending him because he was young.
Sure.
He's doing great. I've had kids that have turned 5 in September that have done great. I've had kids that have come to school at 6 that have still struggled. So I think the big things, and this is actually something that they're going to be giving out as parents come in to enroll kids in our schools this spring.
Yeah.
But some of the big things are, your kiddo needs to be able to draw and tell about a picture.
Sure.
Recognize some letters, numbers, and shapes, know their ABCs, count to 10, those basic academic things. But one of the biggest things is that kiddos need to be able to sit and focus on a story for 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
Or recognizing personal boundaries and space, using the bathroom and washing their hands independently. I mean, all of those things that you think, oh, they'll be okay. Somebody's there to help them. There's really not. I can't go into the boys' bathroom and help with that kind of stuff. Being able to zip and unzip your own clothing, take care of those kind of needs, knows your their first and last names, takes turns and shares, all of those things. But what my biggest advice to parents is trust your gut. If you don't feel like your kid is ready, keep them home.
Sure.
It's not going to hurt them.
Right.
I know more people who have sent their kids early and regretted it than I do people who redshirted them, if you will, and kept them home until they were 6.
Have you had, I guess, some students who, they were 6 by the time they came to kindergarten, they learned how to go to school, and they learned how to do those things, and maybe academically they were far enough, and maybe they didn't go to 1st grade or just moved on. Have you had students in that kind of capacity as well?
Yeah. And like I said before, it all just absolutely depends on the individual kid. Every kid is so different, and every situation is so different that it just, it's very much a case-by-case basis.
Is the best place to go to get feedback on that is the preschool screening, or are there other things where you can go to get feedback?
Us kindergarten teachers at any school would be more than happy to visit with parents if they wanted to come in and ask us about that. Depending on the school that kids are enrolled at, it's not a mandate in Billings Public Schools, but a lot of schools are doing kind of a readiness screener before school starts for kids that are already enrolled. So that has been very successful. Talking to your pediatrician can kind of give you some baseline information of where to go. But if there's ever any doubt, absolutely go to your child's school and just say, can I make an appointment to visit with a kindergarten teacher and talk to us about what you're seeing and what your concerns are, and we would be more than willing to have that conversation ahead of time rather than have a kiddo start that's not ready and have that struggle. Because we have had kids start that end up getting pulled at some point in the year because they just weren't ready. And you don't want to start them out with a negative experience like that.
Do you find that if they've had siblings in school, that's very helpful?
I do, yeah, I really do. And I think if they've had preschool, that's very helpful. It's almost to the point where if kids don't do preschool, they're kind of behind from the get-go. There are some parents that have done great things at home. I don't want to discount that at all. But again, like I was saying before, kids have to learn how to be in that structured school setting. So being in a preschool program is a huge help. And having older siblings to kind of show them the ropes and help them with comfort level, you know, especially if they're young enough that they're still in the same elementary school, is super helpful. So
maybe walk us through a day in a kindergarten class. What do you guys do in the morning? How important is recess? How important is lunch? Kind of walk us through your day in a kindergarten class.
So my school this year is doing what's called a soft start. So the kids, we used to do a morning walk until everybody was ready to come in. Now the kids just come in when they get there, which has been really nice because they come in. It's a calm, quiet start to the morning. They can read books. They can play with activity tubs, whatever they want until the bell rings. Then in my class, I use something called responsive classroom that I was trained in years ago. So we have a morning meeting every day. We sit in a circle and every kid either gives a handshake or a hug and they get to choose how they're going to greet each other. And we greet each other around the circle. We say the pledge. We do our morning message, all of those kind of, you know, getting settled things in the morning. And then our whole morning is English language arts. So we do whole group reading. We do small group reading. That's when they'll do their learning centers. We do writing. All of those things are in the morning. Then we head to lunch. We have a very early lunch, 11 o'clock. And then after lunch is math. We do science in the afternoon, usually some more writing in there. We do, at my school this year, we made the decision to not have a morning recess. And it actually, I have loved it because the kids, we had to do recess so early that it was almost like we were just getting going with our day and it was, okay, stop, now we have to get ready, get all the winter gear on, head out to recess. They're so much fresher and more ready to learn in the morning that I just felt like we were losing a lot of learning time. So we do what are called brain breaks in our own classroom. We use something called Go Noodle, which is awesome. There's great kids yoga activities on YouTube. We're able to use technology to help us with that quite a bit. And so I do about 15 minutes a morning, and the kids love it, and it gets them up and moving and active and gives them a break from what we're doing. And then we made our lunch recess longer, and we do a longer afternoon recess.
And what difference do you see in the kids once they're able to go outside and blow off some steam and come back? Are they usually ready to come back, or do we have to gather ourselves?
Oh, we have to gather ourselves. After lunch, I do something called peacetime in my room. And like today, I put on a campfire log thing on YouTube with Christmas music and just had them sit with their heads down for a few minutes. Just to get us calm and ready for the afternoon. Especially the week before Christmas. Things are wild right now. But I also, you know, will do Play-Doh or different fine motor tubs and different things like that just to kind of get them centered. When we have that late in the day afternoon recess, once we come back, it's just, some days it's just survival mode and hanging on until it's time to go.
And then how long into the school year do you find that the kids have adjusted? Sure, some come from preschool, some come from home, but for all of them, I would assume it's an adjustment in their schedule, in their life, in the routine that they know. This is an adjustment. How short can that take, and how long can that take?
You know, I usually feel like we're all on pretty firm ground by about the beginning of November. By parent-teacher conferences, I feel like we're all doing pretty well. Then December hits and the wheels fall off a little bit. We'll have a little regrouping to do in January. But I would say end of October, beginning of November. We're looking pretty good and ready to roll.
So then in January, are there new activities that you kind of throw at them now that we know a lot of these routines? Okay, we're going to step up our game here.
You know, usually in January is when I start those guided reading groups that I was mentioning earlier. With the group that I have this year, since there's so few of them, which is awesome and wonderful, and I'm loving every minute of having a little bit smaller class this year. they are also just 17 wonderful kids. And so I've been able to push up my timeline a little bit with this group. But usually after January, or in January, is when I would be able to start those more small group things. And really, January, we really take off academically.
Okay.
So,
if there was something you could change about how kindergarten works, or you know, kind of what's mandated or whatever, is there anything that you wish you could wave your magic wand and, you know, we could do this differently?
Oh, yes. You know, there's just not enough time for the developmental things that we know that kindergartners need. And we all try to, you know, worm them in there however we can, you know, take a half hour here, half hour there. But there's just not the time for play. There's not those things. And I really try to do a lot of that at the beginning of the year anyway, during that first 4 to 6 weeks where we're getting settled, just because I personally get so much information, just, you know, which kids are interacting well, which kids, you know how to share and take turns. And you get so much good observational data from those settings. And we just don't have time to do those things anymore. The curriculum needs are a lot, much higher than they were 10 years ago. So.
What do you see like coming down the pike? What's going to change about kindergarten the next 3 to 5 years? You can see it. It's coming. I know it's coming.
You know, I think it's going to be kind of more of the same of where we're at. I'm hoping we've had new reading, math, and science curriculum all within the last, I would think, 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
So we're all just kind of feeling like we finally have our footing with those. So I'm hoping those stay the same, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't want any big changes.
Yeah.
You know, there's just not enough hours in the day. I would love it if kindergartners could stay longer. They would probably be even more exhausted than they already are. But there's just not enough hours in the day to do everything that we want to and need to do with our kids.
So what is the total amount of time you have them in the classroom over the course of the day?
So our hours are 8:25 to 2:25.
Okay.
Take out 35-ish minutes for lunch, and then they have a half hour a week of PE, library, and music.
Okay.
So they're, you know, like today we didn't have any specialists. They were with me from 8:25 to 2:25 minus lunch. So it's a good chunk of the day. Yeah.
And then how often so once a week it's PE, music, and art class. Library class.
Yep.
What kind of things are those teachers trying to get through to the kindergartners?
You know, in the beginning, it's a lot of the same things that we spend so much time doing because it's a different teacher, it's a different setting, it's different expectations. So it's learning how to do PE, learning how to do library, learning how to do music. The music teacher, we just had our music program yesterday, and it was adorable and wonderful, and the music teacher did a great job. And, you know, PE is a lot of learning peer interaction and how to be a good competitor and be a good sport and things like that. So.
All right. Well, Kristen, I think that's all the time we have, but thank you, and God bless you for being a kindergarten teacher. It still takes a special person to want to be in that classroom each day. So.
Thank you. I love what I do. It's a great time.
All the parents I know, thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you. I enjoy it.